What is taken to be solid sometimes behaves as if gravity no longer existed. A system can keep turning, even when those who feed it no longer understand what it has become. He grips the paper between his fingers. On the sheet, a few terse lines. A Catholic bank, the Union Générale, wants to take back France from the great Paris houses. Julien Morel, financial analyst, looks at the numbers. Everything seems impossible, and yet everything fits. He sees the trap right away. A bank born to reassure Catholics worried by the Republic, financed by notables, priests, religious congregations. A simple promise: your money will be in the hands of your own kind. Julien follows the trail of this discreet flow. Very quickly he understands. This is no longer a bank. It is a tool of power. The anomaly appears in a yellowed chart he consults in a silent archive room. On one column, the great Paris banks. On the other, this Union Générale, established in Lyon since 1878. In a few years, it has absorbed a mass of provincial savings that no new bank should be able to attract so quickly. And above all, the curve that fascinates him, the share price, which rockets upward around 1881, as if an entire segment of Catholic France had decided all at once to bet on this single institution. Julien feels as if he is looking at an attempt to buy the country. With the money of those who thought they were protecting it, doubt sets in. Hypothesis A, the most comfortable one, comes to him naturally. He first tells himself that the Union Générale, despite its Catholic slogans, is just one more bank, created in a France rebuilding after the war. The state has to pay enormous indemnities. The big houses like Rothschild or Crédit Lyonnais place the loans. Everyone needs intermediaries to circulate money. Lyon, a major industrial city, sees the birth of a new joint stock company that wants its share of the spoils. Catholic families invest, notaries, landowners, a few nobles. They entrust their money to a former high banker, Eugène Bontou, supposedly familiar with the workings of international finance. A deposit bank, branches spreading through the provinces, loans to local businesses, a moral discourse to attract a clientele mistrustful of Paris. A matter of trust, nothing more. This hypothesis explodes in a single sentence when Julien comes across the list of the first board members, almost all of them connected, directly or indirectly, to militant, monarchist, and Catholic networks. Everything flips. Hypothesis B imposes itself, far more troubling. Julien starts to see the Union Générale not as a simple bank, but as the financial arm of a political camp. Tensions with the secular republic are rising. The school laws are fueling the anger of many Catholics. In this climate, part of the practicing bourgeoisie turns its back on the great Paris banks, deemed too tied to liberal, cosmopolitan circles hostile to the church. The Union Générale appears with a perfectly calibrated message: Christian finance, money invested in safe ventures, explicit support for Catholic businesses and newspapers. Julien reconstructs the mechanism. Parishes relay calls to subscribe. The religious press praises the bank's solidity. Provincial notables reassure depositors. Money pours in. With these deposits, the bank does more than lend to a few pious factories. It gains a foothold in secondary railways, in real estate, in ventures abroad. It captures flows that, until then, almost inevitably pass through Paris. Julien understands that behind the moral facade lies a project: to build a pole of high Catholic finance capable of competing head-on with the Rothschilds and the major secular deposit banks. What he took to be a defensive reaction now looks like an offensive. Then everything flips again. Hypothesis C troubles him even more. What if, behind this overt project of Catholic power, the real logic was no longer even religious, but purely speculative? The same networks that promised moral finance may have used the fervor and fear of their supporters to feed a fragile scheme, where convictions served mainly as fuel for uncontrolled expansion. Julien feels that the further he goes, the less he knows who is really holding the reins: the believers, the bankers, or the markets they claim to tame. As the pages go by, only one thing starts to obsess Julien: speed. Not doctrine, not grand speeches. The speed at which the Union Générale grows. At the start, the operations seem conventional: deposits coming in, loans going out, a few industrial holdings. The balance sheets show reserves, relationships with the Bank of France, access to rediscounting like other institutions. Nothing exotic. A heavier silence settles over the room. Then, as he moves toward the turn of the 1880s, the lines change in density. Capital increases follow one after another. New share issues attract an enthusiastic public, often already ideologically committed. The stock is listed on the exchange, first in Lyon, then in Paris. That's where everything starts to tighten. Julien follows the share price curve over several months. It soars. This is no longer quiet, steady saving. It's fever. Wealthy Catholics buy, the more modest follow, sometimes on credit. Loans on securities develop. People borrow to buy even more shares. They pledge those shares as collateral to borrow more. Leverage effect. The bank itself ends up caught up in the rise of its own value, directly or through its satellites. In the financial archives, Julien spots another anomaly: the way in which Union Générale inflates its own balance sheet. It creates or takes stakes in real estate companies, secondary railway companies, more distant projects, sometimes in Austria-Hungary or in the Balkans, where Bontu has experience. These securities are recorded as assets at flattering values, sometimes above market. On paper, everything looks fine. In reality, a growing share of what the bank owns is neither liquid nor easily saleable. A single fragility outweighs all the others. When Julien formulates it for himself, it comes down to a few words. The bank promises everyone they can withdraw their money at any moment, but it has locked that money into projects that cannot be unwound on demand. It is not even a sophisticated scam. It is the heightened version of a mundane risk of deposit banks. The conclusion hangs in the air, except that here, this risk is worsened by two mutually reinforcing forces. On one side, stock market speculation on Union Générale's own shares. On the other, the religious and political symbolic charge. Julien reads reports of general meetings. The profits announced are high, the dividends generous. A few worried voices question the quality of the assets, the concentration in certain sectors, the extent of foreign commitments. They run into a wall of enthusiasm and ostentatious confidence. As long as the price rises, as long as the dividends are paid, it is all too easy to sweep doubts aside. In the Paris financial press, however, Julien finds warning signs. Some newspapers point to Union Générale's dependence on speculation, the scale of its fixed assets, its vulnerability if the market turns. Bontu and his close associates defend the bank's solidity, invoke the real value of their holdings, and play down the danger. At the same time, the context is tightening. Certain railway and real estate stocks begin to fall. Credit is tightening on the Paris market. Interest rates are rising, and financing speculative positions is becoming more expensive. Union Générale is no longer simply exposed to its own choices. It is caught up in a market movement that goes beyond it. Julien comes back to this single reason for the deadlock, the one that will prove fatal. Everything depends on confidence, but this confidence is no longer only economic. It is political, religious, identity-based. As long as Catholic circles believe in it, the machine keeps running. Deposits stay, savings accumulate. As soon as rumor reverses this movement, everything collapses. He imagines the scene at a provincial counter when the first rumors circulate. A priest who has recommended the bank to his parishioners arrives in the morning, looking grave. Small savers, bourgeois families, widows of notables, come discreetly to ask whether everything is all right. They are told yes, that the attacks come from a hostile press, that the Republic wants to bring down a flourishing Catholic institution. They are sent home with a slightly strange smile. Then the figures deteriorate. At the end of 1881, the share price starts to fall. Short sellers take their profits, rumors swell, the first depositors withdraw their funds. The flow reverses. Union Générale must find cash. It tries to sell its holdings. No one wants them at those prices. The securities are illiquid, or attract interest only at levels much lower than those recorded on the balance sheet. Julien pictures those days when every withdrawal request becomes a physical wound for the managers. Reserves melt away. The offices smell of sweat and the fresh ink of repayment demand letters. The Bank of France becomes the last resort. Grant more rediscounting or not. Support this bank or let it fall. That is the question hanging over the marketplace. In the deliberations, Julien senses a heavy hesitation. Supporting l'Union Générale too far means taking the risk of endorsing a strategy considered imprudent, even hostile to the established circuits of high finance. Refusing means provoking a spectacular bankruptcy that will shake the confidence of thousands of depositors, essentially Catholic, essentially provincial. The decision takes shape. The aid will not be enough. Suspension of payments is declared in January 1882. That is when the wall becomes concrete. In front of certain counters, people are waiting, gloved hands clutching savings books, voices cracking from shouting their demands. The doors remain closed. Julian notes, in a report, one remark that strikes him. A woman faints when she realizes her savings are lost. This detail, this body giving way in front of a bank door, hurts him more than all the large loss figures. The experts he consults today, for their part, speak in sharp terms. They agree that Union Générale was the product of overly rapid, poorly controlled expansion, fueled by a dangerous mixture of speculation and religious loyalties. Some add, however, that the attacks from Parisian financial circles and short sellers amplified the crisis, and that the bank might have survived without this hostile climate. All of them refuse to admit publicly that the deeper fear remains that money might start circulating durably outside the networks they still control today. Julian, for his part, wants to understand what remains after the collapse. He reads the bankruptcy procedures almost mechanically. Court, trustees, inventory of assets, valuation of claims. It is a cold litany. Again, the figures say something simple. What the bank actually owns, once sold, does not cover what it owes. Equity stakes booked at too high a value, distant projects, speculative fixed assets. All this turns into outright losses. Behind these balance sheets, he sees the families, the religious congregations, the Catholic organizations that had placed part of their resources there. Certain dioceses, newspapers, schools financed by the income from these investments find themselves asphyxiated. Bourgeois fortunes evaporate in a few months. Catholic high finance, which dreamed of erecting itself as an autonomous bloc, suddenly cracks apart. What follows is less drama than erosion. Catholic savings, traumatized, retreat to investments deemed safer: government bonds, major corporations' bonds, deposits in older banks. The idea of a major investment bank explicitly Catholic, capable of rivaling the Parisian giants, loses all credibility. No one wants to carry that project at such a scale anymore. The circuits do not disappear completely. They fragment. Here, a local savings bank tied to a parish network. There, a more cautious credit institution, inspired by a social doctrine that is just beginning to take shape. But the dream of a single, powerful center has been shattered. Politically, Julian notes that the bankruptcy of Union Générale is a godsend for some. Republican deputies use it to attack monarchist and Catholic circles, denouncing a clerical bank incapable of managing the money entrusted to it. The anti-clerical press goes on the rampage, mocking these pious elites ruined by a project that wanted to challenge the Republic on its own ground: money. In Catholic newspapers, the tone is different. The emphasis is placed on the mistakes of a few leaders, on the economic climate, on the violence of speculation, rather than on the very idea of organized Catholic finance. Julian notices that major banking reforms do not arrive right away. The system remains more or less the same: deposit and investment banks, broad freedom to issue securities and take equity stakes, oversight by commercial courts and by the Banque de France. The players learn, claim to be more cautious, but the framework does not change overnight. What really changes are the power relations. Crédit Lyonnais, Société Générale, and the great houses of high finance consolidate their positions. They take over part of Union Générale's clientele, strengthen their reserves, and monitor their riskiest exposures more closely. Diversification becomes a key word. Risk management improves in small steps, crisis after crisis. The system, however, is not immune. Other stock market crashes will erupt, showing that no lesson is ever fully absorbed. In Catholic circles, Julian gradually detects a more discreet movement. Bishops, theologians, and thinkers are beginning to think differently about financial instruments. The failure of the Union Générale looms in the background. Distrust of a certain kind of financial capitalism is fed by this experience. People speak more of prudence, ethics, and limits not to be crossed. Little by little, the emphasis shifts towards social works, relief funds, cooperative initiatives, rather than toward the conquest of a high finance of their own. What collapses for Julien is the illusion that a political or religious camp could buy itself a country by cobbling together its own banking infrastructure as one builds a fortress. The Union Générale seemed to offer this possibility: divert the savings of one camp, aggregate them, and turn them against the dominant circuits. Its fall reveals something else to him. As soon as a bank promises to reconcile everything, loyalty, faith, returns, power, it exposes itself to a fatal temptation, that of taking more risks than its own system can absorb. What he discovers instead is darker, narrower. The big banks, even if contested, remain at the center. Those that try to escape them end up knocking at their door or crashing. Catholic networks do not disappear, but they gradually mold themselves into the forms the system accepts. Catholic high finance does not really rise again. It dissolves into a landscape where money circulates first according to market constraints, and only afterward according to loyalties. Closing his notes, Julien is left with a brutal question. Since the Union Générale, has anyone really managed to make morality anything more than a sales pitch in the financial battle? The late afternoon light brushes the gilded edges of the ledgers lined up on the shelves. A fine dust floats, visible only when it crosses the beam of a lamp left on. On the table, the columns of figures succeed one another, straight, mute, punctuated by a few black ink corrections. Outside, through a poorly washed window, one can hear the regular sound of a streetcar, and farther away, the muffled sound of a bell striking the hour. In the silence of the room, the cardboard cover of an old balance sheet rises slightly in a draft, then falls back without a sound.